Hey, podcast listener, this is your host with the most. All right, sit back. We're going to talk toilets at the beginning of this episode, but trust me, we're going to get into actually a really great conversation about education in today's world. So sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
I don't mean to be that guy, Tucker, but I think Spitfire is my least favorite restaurant in Fargo-Moorhead. And I know people who love it, and so I begrudgingly end up there 2-3 times a year.
Before we go any further on it, though, let's make sure that we're talking about this using similar terminology. When you say it's your least favorite, I want to understand if you mean to say it's the worst restaurant, or if you mean to say of my favorite restaurants, it is the least favorite.
No, it is not in my... In fact, let me tell you a story. I had a birthday in 2020, pandemic time, right? And we decided what we'll do is we will order food in advance and go pick it up, and so that my bubble could all have a meal together. And my mother-in-law, bless her soul, was like, you know who does that is Spitfire. Oh, and they do great barbecue. And JJ loves barbecue. And I want to be like, well, they don't do great barbecue at best. But I know you like it, so I will be agreeable. So we called a week in advance, and they said, we don't take reservations a week in advance for a big to-go order like that. You have to call the day before.
Why? That's weird.
Right? So we called the day before, and they're like, actually, you're going to have to call the morning of. So we called the morning of, and they said, well, there's no way we can put this order together in time. So now I have got like 7 people who are expecting to eat, and this is not in an era, remember, where we were going on to restaurant. Like, if you're not full, you could just stop at a restaurant on the way home.
Yeah.
I had to feed these people. So we ended up going with Famous Dave's instead, which is no longer a restaurant in Fargo-Moorhead. I guess technically it is, because you can still get Famous Dave's food at Granite City, but it's not Famous Dave's, but it is Famous Dave's. I don't know how that works. But it was a sad moment for everybody, because as much as I dislike Spitfire, everyone else disliked Famous Dave's even more. And I don't know why we were like, we've got to make it barbecue themed. I would have been happy with a couple of pizzas.
Well, your mother-in-law set an expectation, and then you all seem to feel a cultural pressure to maintain that expectation. Otherwise, it's just a wish that just dies on the vine, and everyone hates watching that. Right?
And everyone's like, what a bummer of a birthday for you.
When I was
37's tough.
I was at Spitfire yesterday, and one thing I thought when I was using the bathroom is you'd think that forever how good a place smells on the inside, that means you should like multiply your bathrooms by that amount, right? Like a place that smells as good as Spitfire has no business having one sit-down toilet.
Oh,
in the men's
agreed.
room, right? I mean, you'd think like, listen, smell the air right now. Look how much, this is all wood fire grill stuff that you're smelling.
Yeah, we're going to serve you a whole chicken and a plate of ribs, and we've got onion strings.
This is proteins and starches, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to have at least more than one sit-down toity in the men's room. I have no idea what the women's room is.
What was the urinal situation?
2.
No.
Or was it 1? No, I think it was 2.
Okay.
But that's not enough.
Because I would say if there was only one urinal in there, maybe the situation was you accidentally went into like the employee bathroom.
Right. There's no locking mechanism on it. So it's definitely one of those.
So it's a communal toilet.
It's a communal. Well, there's a locking mechanism on the door to that toilet. It's not just anyone can walk in on that, dude.
You ever go to Azumi's? You ever go to the all-you-can-eat sushi place?
I have gone there.
Okay. Every time I've been there and I go in the bathroom, the floor, which is fake, they're porcelain like tile planks, right? It's all wet. Fake wet planks. I just don't get it.
Yeah, no, I think like if you walk into a restaurant and you can't really smell much of anything, then I think you're fine with 2 sit-down toilets. That's probably more than enough for you.
Yeah, probably.
But if I'm smelling a wood fire grill, if I'm smelling, spices in the air and good smelling ones, there at minimum you should have a 4-banger.
A 4-banger.
A 4-banger.
Oh my God.
Absolutely. Because also, what if one breaks, right? That happens all the time. And so you want to know that at a minimum, you can always have 3 toilets running.
Okay. Would you like to hear something I heard recently about toilets where I said, no way, there's no way that is true whatsoever. I'm calling you out. I am calling you out. Somebody was telling me, and I can't remember who. I wish I could remember because it probably would make the story better, but I don't remember who was telling me this, that they said, I was watching on TikTok that, have you ever wondered why the doors and the walls on a bathroom, like like when you're in a bathroom, don't go all the way to the ground? They're like, it's because if you have a medical emergency, they need to be able to get to you. And I'm like, no way. BS. That is a total lie. Because I can push one of those doors open with my arm.
They are not strong.
Bingo. There's no way that the world got together and said, everyone, we're going to make them so that we can see their feet and pull them out from underneath if need be. Because as we know, once the drawbridge lock closes, there will be no entering that stall.
I would assume they don't want to pull you up by your feet because if you're sitting up against the wall, that means, and you're incapacitated, your head's going to hit the ground.
And it could possibly end up in the toilet.
Yeah.
Also, what if you smear duty everywhere? But that's the thing is, like, I've been to places, apparently in Europe, stall doors go all the way to the ground. And I've been to, like, one place, they used to, at the Holiday Inn, I used to go to weddings there all the time, and they had stall doors that went all the way down, which was real nice. Mm-hmm. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I just assume a lot of people are going to come to your place, so let people be like, oh, I love going there, and also the bathroom situation is great.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Did you know, name 2 bathrooms that you like? We've talked about our Fargo Theater bathroom.
That's still the all-time favorite, although it's been a year since I've returned to it, so I need to figure out what that is.
I was just there. It's glorious.
Is it great?
It's glorious.
I feel like it would feel different if you're just working there, and you're just like, I'm going to go take my 10 minutes, right? At my break, versus, I'm at an event, and there's a lot of people waiting to use this behind
It was great. And you know what I did? I brought a soda with me. I had my soda. I didn't want to go to my seat and drop it off. I brought it with me.
A bathroom in this town that
or anywhere. I will tell you, you can tell me any bathroom anywhere that you go, yes, I like this bathroom.
No, the places were all at certain locations in Vegas.
Oh, okay.
That I've been to where they're clear, or just at really fancy casinos where they've invested in that side of it, and they're like, there's going to be a ton of people, right? And so like there was one, I'm blanking on which location it was, but had 10 sit down toilets, and each of them was fully enclosed, and then a ton of urinals, and at minimum 6 wash stations, right? So enough to cover a lot of people at once, because why not go overboard with your bathroom?
Yeah.
Are you really going to regret that at
No.
oh man, at any given time, there's only 2 of our 6 toilets being used. That's good. That means that you can take on a sudden rush of people without worrying about it, or even if a couple break down, you still got a few spares left over.
Have you ever been to an event where they take a couple of the men's bathrooms and they turn them into ladies' rooms just for that event because they know there's going to be a higher influx of women to men at a certain place? For example, I've been to the Fargo Dome where they do that, when Pink is going to come, right? Because they're like, we know that it's going to be 70% female and they need to use restrooms.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think also I'm not an expert on the topic of restrooms, but it seems to me like right now we offer these 2 options, male or female, for the bathrooms. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if it should be more about we offer different options for bathrooms that are dependent on your level of comfort being around other people, right? So bathrooms just these are the single closed door stalls over here. This is the urinal section where if you have no issue with just peeing with a bunch of dudes, or whatever at that, and sort of navigating it and breaking it up that way, and always assuming that you need more bathrooms than you don't. Right.
Bingo.
Oh, just go ahead and assume you need more than you think you do.
Okay. I've got a favorite bathroom. It's at Bobby and Steve's mobile station. It's a Phillips station.
Write this down.
Okay. Yeah. Bobby and Steve's. They've got a couple of them, but the one that I really like is off France Avenue and 494 in the Twin Cities. These guys understand the assignment that, yes, I'm coming to get gas, but this might be the time I get gas for the next 200 miles before I stop. So the food is always really nice and laid out. The how you get in and out is nice. They've got good music playing. They've got an abundance of checkouts. It's nice, and they put it into their bathrooms as well. Years ago, I was reading a franchise piece about how in the mid 90s, McDonald's was having problems because they were opening up so many restaurants, and they were watching dollars go down at even well-established restaurants. And so whoever was the CEO at the time said, listen, we are no longer building new restaurants. We're actually going to close some restaurants. And for example, in Way North Fargo, that McDonald's that was like way North Fargo, like,
so not 19th, but like,
yeah, there was like another one up there or something like that.
Man, I'm not sure.
But because where was it? It's like up by the Shack. There used to be a McDonald's up by the Shack.
Yep. You're right. It used to be right across from the Happy Joe's that was up there.
Right, and it had an outdoor play place with it.
Yep.
That was one of the ones that got axed.
Oh man, that's been years.
A long time, right?
A bunch of memories just came back.
Old brick building up there. Yeah. So the reason that he decided to close a bunch of restaurants was they were not strategically picking the right spots for it. And he doubled down. He said, we are checking our bathrooms for cleanliness every 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to lean into the fact of like, people will stop at a gas station to use the bathroom.
Yep.
But 2 out of the 5 times they made a purchase while they were there.
Yep.
And he goes, we're already maintaining these bathrooms. What if we made it 50-50 so that every other time you stopped into a McDonald's to use the bathroom, we could do this, which is the reason why Redbox, do you remember when the Red Boxes came? That's one of the reasons they said is like, we need to concentrate on not getting people to come only for burgers. Get them to come for another reason, and then we'll get them to leave with a couple burgers.
Gotcha.
And so the bathroom has always been a place that's very important. And I can tell you a couple, like there's a newer McDonald's that's in Moorhead on 8th Street that has got an astronaut bathroom. And when I say astronaut bathroom, it feels like McDonald's called up NASA and they're like, listen, we need to design something super fancy. You know, we know that we get people who come here who need to use the bathroom, but also we want them to think about getting a beverage when they leave.
Yeah.
So like, could you help us with that, NASA? Also, Amazing Thailand in Uptown Minneapolis has got a space toilet in it where it's a Korean toilet that has all these like beeps and buzzes and things that you can do beyond just like having a bidet setting. There's one that says turbo on it, and I've never been brave enough to push turbo because I don't know what's going to happen. What if it sucks off my privates?
What if it takes you to the moon, you know?
Right, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Raising the eyebrows as you say it.
Right. Or what if it sucks my testicles down a pipe? These are the things that I worry about when I go and see a space toilet. But those are one of the things I think we take for granted, the fact that bathrooms are an important part of not only the home that you live in, because you spend a good amount of time in the bathroom, but you also need to have in public places. The worst time ever that you could use a bathroom is after you've been swimming. And you get out of the pool and you're like, I gotta use a toilet, not a urinal, but a toilet. And you sit down, you got a wet rump, and you're on that toilet, and nothing feels comfortable about that. It's usually hot because you've been swimming, right? So it's the kind of weather. I hate that.
Or it's even worse when you sit down, it's already warm.
And
you're like, damn it.
Warm,
Damn it.
wet, warm is the worst.
Sharing this with a lot of people. No, thank you.
Tucker, I know that you recently got a chance. You went to go speak to some students?
Yeah. Well, no, to teachers.
To teachers, educators.
Yeah. It was a K through 12 STEM conference that was being hosted by UND. And so I got invited by Aaron, who is the guy that I worked for when I was making those animations for ND EPSCoR. Said, hey, would you be up for coming and kind of presenting on these videos that we made and giving some kind of a small workshop on edutainment? And I was like, sure, not knowing at all what I was going to say whatsoever. And so the night before I had to go down, I finally was like, I really need to sit down and do the work of outlining my thoughts so I actually have something to say and do. So was able to do that the night before. It took me about 2 hours, felt really jazzed about it. And then, drove there the next day. And there was a lot of tech issues, which was unfortunate, but it was also not for me to worry about. So I just kind of had to wait through those, and then felt really proud of like the stuff.
Do you have any Windows XP software?
It was a Windows Surface, Microsoft Surface that they were having issues with.
Bummer.
And I got one guy get kind of miffed at me when I said, "Well, my hard drive is formatted for a Mac." And he got really upset with me, and then realized he was at the wrong space when it was supposed to be at this like Mars rover thing in the next room over, and so left after that. And I thought, thank God I don't have to deal with this guy. But yeah, it was just educators looking to learn more about edutainment. And so I did my spiel about 15 minutes, had really good feedback both times. And so that was great. And so I was wrapped up for the day because I only had to do 2 of them. And so I thought, well, Grand Forks has some thrift shops that I don't hit because I'm never in Grand Forks. So I'm going to go on a VHS run for like an hour and a half before I head out of town. And so I did, like I hit a Dakota Boys Ranch they had there and an Ark there and all these other places. And I found this one place, the name of which is blanking on me. But when I showed up, they had an entire room devoted to VHS.
Whoa.
So it was like mother load, right? Awesome. And so I'm back there. I'm the only customer in the store. I'm making a big pile of tapes. I am just jazzed, right? And there's 2 old ladies running the space, talking it up out front about people they know who have died. And an old guy comes in. I can hear him come in, and they seem to know him and make jokes about, oh, are you going to help us out work in the shop today? And he's like, hell no, I'm not going to do that. Blah, blah, blah. So I get my pile of tapes and I go to check out, and I walk past this guy. He looks kind of like Santa Claus. Bigger guy, beard, baseball cap on, sitting in a rocking chair.
Let me ask a quick question about his beard. What color was the beard?
It was grayish.
Okay, did he have a nicotine stain around his mouth?
Not that I noticed.
Okay. Because I've really noticed that on a lot of bearded old men is that like you can tell whether or not they smoke by the nicotine stain. Anyway, keep going.
That I didn't know. He was dressed kind of like a farmer.
Okay.
Like overalls.
How's overalls?
Overalls and farmer stuff.
Do you have a
Plaid,
big thing
flannels.
of wheat coming out of his mouth that he was chewing on?
He looked like he could have if he was from Central Casting. Like I would have added that to the scenario.
Like when he sees a plane take off, does he go, golly?
He's someone who would make just comments about what the air conditions are that day.
He's seen every episode of the Andy Griffith Show.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
I walked past him, and at his feet is a cat that's curled up and cleaning itself. And I, walking past him, said, oh, hey there, kitten. And this guy goes, cat, like angrily at me. And I said, you're right, sir. I apologize. Definitely a cat, not a kitten. And this guy goes, some variation of cats are small or kittens are smaller. Like if it's that big, then that's when it's a cat. It's not a kitten anymore. Just to really drive home for me that I was wrong about this, right? And I said, I hear you. You know, I have 2 cats at home, and I often will just affectionately refer to them as kitten. And he goes, I have 6 cats. And without me thinking, I said, you do have 6 cats to his face. And then realized that I just insulted this guy and kind of froze. He didn't pick up on it. He started just going through the list of all their medical conditions that they're dealing with.
And the cat, I call it cat conversation.
Yeah, it was a lot of cat. So right into cat conversation. Clearly, he hadn't had a chance today to talk to anyone about this. The lady said must have already heard it. So starts going through his cat conditions while I'm checking out at the till. And then I looked over the shoulder of the woman running the checkout, and she had a giant framed photo of Donald Trump. And then right next to it was a giant framed photo of George W. Bush with a word balloon saying, you miss me yet? And then a framed photo of Ronald Reagan right after that. And I was like, this is a movie scene I'm in right now. And then I bought my 4 copies of Jurassic Park and a bunch of other stuff.
No wonder that shop...
Got the heck out of there.
No wonder that shop had an affinity for VHS tapes. They're stuck in the 80s.
Yeah, but I like now that I've said it and it worked, I want to start using that. That person definitely has 6 cats as a phrase. Like this is someone who is detached enough where they don't understand how socially awkward they are.
Yep.
And so they're saying things that maybe aren't necessarily bad, but go, yeah, you're not fully connected to what we're doing right now, are you? That guy definitely has 6 cats.
It's interesting how like cats more than any other animal like is worshipped. Like cats are feared and they're part of like lore.
Yeah. I mean, they've been with us for how long? I mean,
domesticated
Egypt, right?
cats, have been around for a very long time.
We've loved kitties for so long. I wonder if we...
Cats.
I wonder if did we domesticate dogs first or cats?
Cats.
We domesticated cats first?
I am 90. I think that utilizing dogs in farming ways has been around for a long time, but I do believe cats have been something that we've had a lot longer because we've used them as like service animals, right? So like we use them to like take care of rats and vermin and things like that. And for a long time, we started bringing dogs into that. So my dog Neely is a Wheaten Terrier, and they were bred to be ratters on ships.
Yeah, that's right.
So I brought this up to someone. I was like, okay, let's pull it back to bathrooms real quick. So when they were like, when the Pilgrims were coming across, you'd have to do your business in a bucket and then dump it over the side of the boat, right? We didn't have fancy cruise ship bathrooms like we've got today. But if you had an animal on board, you had to deal with their mess on board.
Yep.
Yuck.
Yep.
Gross.
And so they had cats, and they just used the litter box.
I actually...
On the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria.
I would be interested in knowing when they developed the litter box, and I bet it's something from, like, transportation area, like where ships were going.
It would make a ton of sense for them to have cats for, protecting the grain or whatever it is.
And they're nimble enough to be on a boat where things are changing all the time.
Last weekend, I went to a farm to do my final shoot for AJ Goes to the Dog Park, which is now completely in the can, officially done filming. And it was John Lundwall's farm. Thank you, John Lundwall, for letting us use it. And we had a fun time. There were cats everywhere, and none of them would let us pet them. Like, none of them. And it broke my heart. And John had to tell me, like, yeah, these are not people cats. These are cats that just live on the farm.
They're working cats.
They're working cats. They kill rats and mice, and then they're just out here living their own feral lifestyle, and we just don't touch them. But they're everywhere. And that broke my heart. Like, seeing cats everywhere was great. But then knowing that even their little kittens that were walking around didn't want anything to do with you was heartbreaking.
Well, you know what they said? There are no cats in America. And the streets are paved with cheese.
I recounted to Mr. Tim Larson what you reported about the vast liberties they took with An American Tail for the stage adaptation.
Yes.
Including cutting out the cat character, which is an abomination in and of itself, but then rewriting the ending so you don't get the giant rat.
Yeah.
Right?
It's ridiculous.
Although
I don't know how you do that on stage. I mean, here I am being like, I would like an honest adaptation, but I don't know how the stagecraft works.
It's not that difficult. The cat is just the same size as the mouse.
Prepare the sequent weapon!
Yeah, and then the sequent weapon is a giant puppet of just a head. Like, that's not that outside of the wheelhouse of that. They could definitely do something like that. Its giant hand comes in on one side, and maybe its tail on the other side at different times.
So they did this giant cat with like big paws coming in for like when they were in Minsk and like so. But they
just use the same technique.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Just use the same technique.
So, have you ever noticed about Greg Carlson was the first person who ever told me about the 20 master plots. Right. The idea that almost every story you can distill down to one of these, man versus man, man versus nature, the Cinderella idea of someone, becoming someone they're not. And anyway, the building of a creature to scare off other creatures when you're meek is a storyline that I think we see over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, right off the top of my head, we can say it's in An American Tail, and then in A Bug's Life, they build the bird because Hopper's afraid of the bird.
Yeah.
Right? What was I just... There's another one, too, from... Oh, they do it in Mr. Peabody and Sherman, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that movie, it's an adaptation of the not Fractured Fairy Tales, but it's the Wayback Machine. It's from like the Rocky and Bullwinkle show.
Oh, yeah.
Where
Okay.
if a boy can own a dog can own a boy, and it's about a dog who's extremely intelligent who adopts a boy, and it's his son, and he teaches him by going back in time. It is one of the better, more creative animated films I've seen in a very long time. One of those where like adults can laugh just as much as kids, and Stanley Tucci is Leonardo da Vinci. And they need Leonardo to help them build a machine to kind of kickstart the Wayback Machine because they're stuck in the Renaissance.
Was this claymation?
It wasn't. It's a DreamWorks film, and it's computer generated.
Okay.
And the way Stanley Tucci portrays Leonardo da Vinci is this guy who's just kind of socially awkward, so that's why he invents stuff. At one point, he goes, you know what and he uses a bad Italian accent. He's like, you know what they say, Mr. Peabody, is you cannot make a boy, because I tried it once and it was awkward. And there's this little like wooden like animatronic goes, Papa, Papa. And they set up jokes so well. It was awkward.
I need to add it to, I'm working on a list of like, it's been a while since I've really devoted time and energy to like watching movies and actually making that a part of my life. And finishing the filming of Age Goes to the Dog Park and getting this presentation at UND that I was really stressed out about off of my plate, something I've been wanting to do for a while. And so then I want to spend some time, like a couple times a week, watching movies I haven't seen before. So maybe I should put this one on. I feel like I'm so behind in the pop cultural zeitgeist with movies right now. It's time for me to start playing catch up.
May I ask you about your presentation on edutainment?
Yeah.
And like, can we touch on that a little
Sure.
bit? Like, okay, so I have in my mind what edutainment is, but can you tell me what you presented on?
Yeah, I don't have my notes with me, but I have a photo of him on my phone, which I might need to use just to.
By the way, Tucker is wearing a cat shirt today, so just so you know how much he really wanted to engage this man about his cats, and that went sideways.
JJ is wearing a vest and a white collared shirt because he was a preacher today.
I was preaching.
So edutainment, sort of the standard definition for it I could find online, is just that combination of words. I think it's a portmanteau. I don't know how you pronounce that. Portmanteau of education plus entertainment, right? So you think TV program like Sesame Street, things like that, usually multimedia, that's aimed to educate and entertain at the same time. And I put forward maybe a deeper definition that actually has more efficacy for teachers in K through 12, is that edutainment is actually using creative storytelling to enhance conceptual understanding. And so that when your students are entertained by their learning process, they will be unable to stop themselves from learning. And so an example I gave was, think of your favorite song with lyrics to it, whatever song that is. And my guess is you know the lyrics to your favorite song. And so think about how you learned those lyrics.
Okay.
Did you have to sit down and write them out and go over them a number of times and listen to someone lecture to you about the lyrics and then test yourself to know the lyrics over and over again? Or do you discover that you've learned the lyrics? You know them because you've listened to the song and you enjoy it. And at this point, you know them, right? So you really didn't have a choice in whether or not you learned the lyrics to that song. You found that you loved the song so much that it kind of went into your head. And that was very much the process for me as a student working on these animated videos. So then from there, I moved to a testimonial, which is like, let me give you a testimonial of my experience. I come from a family of educators. So my father taught Fargo Public School System 35 plus years before he retired. My mother teaches cultural dance, has worked as an adjunct professor at MSUM and NDSU. My sister is a full-time teacher working at Arkansas State, teaching theater and dance. My grandmother on my father's side was a public school educator her whole career. In her late 70s, went back to school to get her doctorate in education. So we called her Dr. Lucas after that. My grandfather on my mother's side was the assistant principal at Fargo South for the majority of his career. Before that, he was a math teacher. So I come from a family of educators, right? So imagine my disappointment when I discovered that I'm a really bad student. And that when I was sitting in the classroom in high school, I really struggled. It's embarrassing to even mention out loud what my GPA was when I graduated because it was low. I scraped just barely. And it wasn't because I was lazy, and it wasn't because I was stupid. I, for whatever reason, did not thrive in a standard school setting. And the career I've been able to build is one largely based off of luck and networking and just trying things out in the real world. But I never went to school after high school, really. I did like a month in college and quit. I just realized I was bad in the classroom. When I was making these animated videos with the NDF score scientists, looking back on it, I learned so much about the topics that we were making videos around. And that's because I was involved in this creative process with these educators where we were doing something to make these videos. And I think that process right there is the actual focus of what edutainment should be in the classroom. And so I used, again, after an example of that afterwards, Greg's structure for teaching video production at Trollwood. And I said, so the process that I'm going to basically pitch to you guys to follow in your classrooms, I'm largely ripping off from my teacher, Greg Carlson, who I took video production classes from at Trollwood. And he had this system that I think you guys could use. So we would make a weekly TV show in video production class at Trollwood called Trollwood News at Noon. It was a skit-based show of, 1 to 2 minute segments that the kids in the class would make throughout the week. And then at the end of the week, you would show that video at lunchtime to your peers who are taking other classes. And so I said, the first day of the week, Monday, was sort of a pitch session. So Greg would put us into different teams and we'd try to mix it up every week. And those teams would brainstorm some ideas. And then at the end of that day would pitch these ideas to Greg as though Greg was like the Lorne Michaels of SNL, right? And so he would find one of the things that you've pitched and then assign it to you. Basically say, okay, that idea you have right there, that's a good idea. I want you to start developing it. Here's like a structure for you to develop it. But that's what you're working on this week, right? And then Tuesday into Wednesday, that team that you're working with would then figure out how to gather the raw assets for it, how to film it, get the video and audio. The Wednesday into Thursday, your team would take turns working on editing it, right? And at the end of the week, we'd put it in a package and you'd show it to your peers. And I said, that did 4 things for us that you can establish in your classroom. It created collaboration amongst the students, which would get shifted up every single week. It would give you the opportunity to engage in creative problem solving. It would give you the opportunity to try new things, meaning one week you're acting, the next week you're running the camera, the next week maybe you're more focused on writing. But the biggest thing is it gave you a positive feedback loop in showing it to your peers who gave you positive feedback, causing you to want to do it again. So imagine you have a student one week who has written a book report. And at the end of the week, they're so jazzed about their book report that they decide to share it with their friends. Like, guys, read this book report that I wrote. And their friends are so pumped up about the book report, they give them positive feedback. That was awesome. I loved reading that. That was really, really great, right? I hope I get to make a book report at some time. That would be fun. Which makes your student go, I hope I get to make a book report again next week, right? Because of that positive feedback loop. Mm-hmm. I would assume almost 99% of the teachers even listening to this now have never experienced that with a student with a book report. Doesn't mean that book reports are bad or that there's no place for them in the classroom. But if you can find a way to give a positive feedback loop to the process of what they're doing, they're going to want to keep doing it. And when they're engaged in that process, they can't help but learn things, right? They just will learn things because almost in a Mary Poppins way, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So I wrote out that sort of process that Greg followed for us. And I said, you can adapt this to most anything. It doesn't have to be video. It could be audio. They're podcasting or something along those lines. It could be live theater. They're giving a live presentation at the end of the week to their class. It could be physical art like painting or something else like that. And you can adapt this, right? This is written up as happening over a week, but you could make this happen over a month or a quarter or a semester or a whole year if you really, really want to. But that positive feedback loop is the most important part, because your students are going to want to do this over and over again. And so find a way to, and I drove it home by basically saying, what edutainment does is it creates a narrative around these topics that gives context and enhances understanding. And so that was, I found out, how I learn. And I wasn't getting that when I was in the classroom, when I was a kid. But now I know it about myself at 38, right? That I learned so much more about organoids and all these other things working on that. So that was basically what I was doing, was talking about how we think of edutainment as just this product, this thing that we're sitting and watching. And those things are great. But really, you should think of edutainment as a process of teaching your students by helping them create a narrative around a subject, because that's going to enhance their understanding. I assume that's why storytelling is the oldest form of information passing, because if you wanted to communicate a piece of information to a large group of humans and you wanted to make sure that it was going to land, that they were going to remember it, if you can package it up in some kind of storytelling, they're going to absorb that a lot easier than just by giving them the cold brute fact and saying, write it down, now remember it, don't forget that. Most people don't learn that way.
I find one of the things that modern education lacks is a fun aspect to it, right? So we're asked to regurgitate things in a lot of different ways that isn't nearly as beneficial as people would think that it is. Sure, you can memorize some stuff, but how much stuff did you memorize in high school that you could route right now?
What exactly is it you're teaching them? Are you teaching them just raw data that actually doesn't affect anything? Or are you wanting to teach them understanding,
right?
Comprehension of a concept deeply, understanding what it means for two factions in history to be fighting with each other versus just remembering that battle took place at this date at this time.
One of my favorite pieces of edutainment that I watched that was video based is in my Western civilization high school social studies course, which essentially taught you the history of, from Babylon, all the way through, the Renaissance and, right before the Industrial Age. We watched a video over like 2 days, and it was towards the end of the year, and I was enthralled. And I believe it was animated by the same people who did the Lord of the Rings, like the Rankin and Bass Hobbit stuff.
Okay, yep.
And it told the story of the building of a church in this English town. And the premise of the thing is it's the diaries of this young father who is father meaning like a priest.
Yeah.
Who is there. And so they had been given money from the Pope to build a church, which means that their town instantly grew in size. Their little village grew because they needed all of these masons and all these people to work on it. And he was hoping that they could get the church built within 100 years.
Oh, wow.
And so it's about the creation of this church and the building of it. And at one point, like the cardinal who was overseeing it had been embezzling money and got caught and then was shipped away to the Crusades. And you watch
That's a movie right there.
Right? You watch this young priest who's in his like early 20s at the beginning become old, and he dies during it. And then you start reading the diary of the young priest that he was training at the time. And there was a fire at one point that, like, after they had gotten the roof all put together, a fire destroyed the entire roof. And so they had to start over from there. Honestly, like, I found it on YouTube, like, later on. And it's about, like, it's a 60-minute watch. But it's one of those things that I didn't know how important a church, like having like a grand church was to these small villages. This is the thing that put you on the map. It was a source of income. It was a source of safety. It was something where like people would make pilgrimages to come because if you had some kind of a religious artifact that you had there, it was just one of those things that like captivated my imagination moving forward. And you know what? I remember very little from the rest of that. Side note, also, Mary Warner, my English teacher in high school for all 3 years, did this amazing project was it my freshman year? or maybe my sophomore year, but she was obsessed with the Titanic. She found the story of the Titanic and where it plays in American and British history to be just fascinating. And so throughout the whole second semester, you accrued dollars based on the grades you were getting, and you could bring in special things, and if you gave like a presentation on something that was outside of what you were asked for, you were given additional dollars, and then the amount of dollars that you had starting at the beginning of May would tell you what your ticket was. Essentially like, hey, you're in a first class cabin, and then we had people all the way down to steerage, right? And what was interesting is some of the people who were in steerage, it wasn't because that they were getting bad grades. It was because you were assigned a real person who's on the Titanic and said you were supposed to have a first class ticket. And unfortunately, when you arrived, someone in your family was sick or had head lice. And so they wouldn't allow you into first class. Like they bumped you down to this, or your husband died and they weren't going to allow you to, you need to get to America, but blah, blah. And so you were walking in the shoes of real people. And this is right kind of at the beginning of the internet. So you couldn't just like look up all these facts, but she would each day during the month of May tell you about a part of your voyage. Like she had like a little dossier that she gave every single person. And on the last week of school, she brought in a full-size life raft. And she goes, okay. And then she read off the names of the people who survived. And you had to get out of your desk and come get in the life raft. And then we had a faux funeral for everyone else who didn't make it. And
that's awesome.
And she had like the old timey life jacket on. She made that come to life.
That's fantastic.
And understanding about, at one point she brought in like this ice water, and you had to put your hand in the ice water and see how long you could keep it in there, knowing that that's what the temperature was for the people. I mean, she made education come to life. And that was an English class. It had nothing to do with history, but she brought it around and she goes like, listen, this does have to do with history because people became obsessed with writing about this, and people became obsessed with reading about it. And this is a story that gets printed in every single newspaper across the globe, but like people in the depths of Russia didn't find out about the sinking until almost 7 months later, because that's how long it took news to travel at that time. And you know what? No, it was definitely my junior year, because my sophomore year in English, she dressed up as Padme Amidala. In full makeup, because she
Which variation of Padme?
The white face, like the geisha kind of look with the headdress. And the reason is that she believed that Star Wars was the modern mythology, and this is a way to get you into other types of mythology. And so she goes, listen, when the battle of not the Geonosians, because that's from Star Wars, but like the battle of the Aegean Sea is the exact same as the sky battle. The only difference is they're in starships and they were in like sea ships down here. And she brought that all to life, and she goes like, it was great because this is also at the era too when Star Wars wasn't really cool to be into yet. Like the prequels had come out, but they were pretty much for nerd guys. Like they hadn't found their audience yet. But I loved it. She was a phenomenal teacher who used these skills that you're talking about.
Yeah, she that's definitely a phenomenal example of edutainment. Another one from when I was a kid, and that's something if I were to ever, because this was just like the start of what could be a longer presentation that I might generate at some point. But the gamification of something was a phenomenal way to do it. And at Horace Mann, I have no idea if they still do this, but I think it would be awesome if they still did it. Every year, there was a competition between the 5th graders and the 6th graders called Battle of the Books. And so every year, the 5th graders and 6th graders would be assigned the same reading. So like, basically, it was almost like you were in this reading class with way more kids than normal. And then in the 5th grade and in the 6th grade specifically, there would be a tournament-style quiz show that you would play. You'd be forced onto a team of 4,
What?
So you don't get to pick your team. And then you would be quizzed on books, and it'd be like 2 at a time, bracket style. And then you would play through to find out who is the winner from your class, from your grade. And then the 5th grade winning team and the 6th grade winning team would do battle in front of the entire school.
Oh, hell yes.
in the gymnasium. And so going to school at Horace Mann, you would grow up watching these, knowing that at some point I'm going to be competing in that. And when I'm in 5th and 6th grade, I'm going to be competing in it. And so I competed in the Battle of the Books, never was on a team that made it to that final battle. And what seems to happen more often than not, it just, I guess, the history of the Battle of the Books, although I would love it to find out if one of the teachers there had been like keeping a history of, hey, this is the years of who has won and who has lost, right? And what the books were that you had to read. But it was sort of understood that typically the 5th graders would win. Because they just were a little more motivated. They had something.
They're the underdogs.
They were the underdogs. They had something to prove to the bigger kids. And of course, they would then be a winning 6th grade team. And then if they carried that with them into the 6th grade, well, we won last time. We're going to win this time.
Oh, yeah.
That hubris will come in, although you're not on the same team as you were on the year prior. So I very rarely remember watching the 6th graders win in the final battle of the books.
There was an elementary school. I was out of elementary school at the time, but I remember one of the ones in Fargo had a deal where the principal had promised the kids, if you read 1,000 books during reading month, probably the same time Battle of the Books would take place, right? I will eat my lunch on the roof of the school. And he made good on it.
Good for him.
And he had lunch and like
that feels like an easy one to do though.
So like it was like a pitched roof. And so like, and it was during recess. So all the kids got to come out and watch so-and-so have to climb a giant ladder and get up there, and like it looked like it was a little precarious and like.
I think he could have sweetened the pot a little bit by saying, I'll be dressed like a princess.
Right. Well, and I think like there's probably a whiteboard with like, or a chalkboard at the time of like, okay, what are we doing? Like, like each kid gets to put a clothespin. Nope, I don't. All the kids will go for the nipples. Nope, we got to get rid of that. But I love when an educator puts themselves out there and says like, listen, I've got skin in the game here. So if you win, I'll do this. There's another one who's like, they will eat their tie, and like they'll eat a tie.
I would assume like, I'll do a dunk tank.
Yeah.
Something like that would be one. And those of like the 3 of you who have the highest whatever, you'll be the ones who get to throw the baseball at the dunk tank kind of a thing. I think that's great. I think that's awesome. And those were the kinds of teachers that I remembered growing up. And it was the night before going to this conference, I was going, what do I talk about? I still didn't quite know. I knew I could talk about the video production side of it really easily.
It'd be very easy to say like, there's a bunch of videos that have been made that convince kids that they're watching something that's a video rather than, and those are fine.
Right.
The Take a Look video series with science, Take a Look, Take a Look. I remember that.
Bill Nye the Science Guy, Beekman's World, Sesame Street. These are all classic examples that are great. But once I realized, when did I have the most fun learning? And when was learning effortless? And it was when I took video production class. And then I had that lightning bolt of, the way Greg had that class structured, you could really apply that to any topic as long as if you're making videos, okay, this month, we're doing videos for history class. And it's going to be about the sinking of the Titanic. And then maybe in math, there's going to be one about, solving certain kinds of logic problems, right? And the kids are encouraged to come up with some kind of a narrative. And you can even give them structures ahead of time, like explore that idea as a fake movie trailer, parodying the Barbie movie trailer, or something along those lines. We had a really popular segment. One of the teachers came up to me and asked me for further suggestions of what she could do, because she was about to begin a multimedia course at her school, and they were going to be doing the weekly news sort of a thing. And I said, well, one thing that we did that was always super popular was Question of the Week, where you come up with a question, and then at lunchtime, you go around with a camera and a microphone, and you get various students and staff to answer the question of the week. So it could be something as simple as, what's your favorite Star Wars character? And then you just montage the answers together. And the students loved that at Trollwood. You might see me on Trollwood News at noon this week because I answered the question of the week.
My favorite question of the week is like, if you could be any home appliance, what would you be? I remember one of the teachers going, I'd be a blender because I'm all mixed up. And I remember thinking like, that is a clever answer that you came up with. Well done.
There was a certain lunch guy that we would always go to because he would give us these amazing dry responses. Like, what is your favorite breakfast cereal? And he said, I like Frosted Flakes because it's great. And just great answers like that. But then sometimes you could also play a trick on the audience where You ask them one question to get certain answers, but then you change the context of the question in the video.
Right, like, who do you think is the best dancer? And then they'll be like, oh, it's definitely Brianna. But then you switch the question, it's like, who's the smelliest person
Exactly.
at Trollwood? Oh, it's definitely Brianna.
What would you use to catch fish if you were fishing, right? So you get different answers for bait, and then you change it to, what would be your favorite toppings to have on a pizza? And then people are like, oh, definitely earthworms. You know, I would just earthworms all day long for no question. My family and I, we've tried crickets before. We've tried crickets. We've tried, leftover worms, and give it that way. So then you're getting that obvious joke innocently, if you can do it innocently.
Yeah.
I also said doing movie trailer parodies was huge. So really, whatever it is that your students are connected to in the pop culture zeitgeist, find a way to parody that. That's an easy shorthand to get them interested if they're not already super into the idea of making videos or doing creative storytelling in some medium. But definitely find out what they're into pop culture wise and give them a connection to parody that. They're there. I mean, they've already got it written in their head of what they want to do.
I recently watched a thing where someone was like, essentially they took like this, they parodied the snap from Avengers Endgame or Infinity War. And so they have this guy and he's all dressed in purple and someone says Thor and he goes, I'll do it. And he snaps his finger and like nothing changed. They're all looking around. They're like, well, what'd you do? And he goes, half the worms on the planet are now gone. And they're all like standing around like, and they're kind of looking at each other. And I was like, well, that's kind of a funny concept.
Yeah.
Like, well, if you took something, I will also say this, watching News at Noon was amazing because it allowed you to find out A, if you were as funny as you thought you were.
Yeah.
B, you could also like revel in the small things that people were able to accomplish, because since we filmed everything at Trollwood, people would be able to see themselves. Like you said, the question of the week was one where they could see themselves, or you involved a dance class in something. And so they're like, oh, look at that.
There were certain answers through the years that would get reused because Greg liked them so much. There's one that Randy Olson, previous guest, gave about, it's something about monkeys. Like she had a monkeys response that we would use over and over again. And then there was a student who, to the favorite Chewbacca or favorite Star Wars question, went Chewbacca, and so we would use that all the time. That answer in whatever question it was. Randy's answer actually got used in the tag at the very end too, because there were a lot of SNL references in the show, and so Greg had named the production company, quote unquote, that was making these Monkey Hate Clean, which was a reference to an SNL skit about having a personal monkey that cleans for you. And at one point, the monkey is written in feces on the wall, "Monkey Hate Clean," and so that became the production title. And then she had that line about monkeys we would use over and over again. So that the ability to make in jokes for your class that only your class kind of understands and follows is also, it's a high, right? Like you feel very connected to this group of people because now you have jokes that you're referencing over and over again in the different things. And it made learning so fun. And I really think you could use that same process where you're basically getting them to collaborate in some way to make a story and then sharing that with the class and getting that positive feedback.
There's a world too where everyone is afraid of AI and having that be the plagiarism tool, where if you engage them in this edutainment, in these, ability to, okay, you're going to create a presentation where you get, you get the dopamine hit from the laughs and stuff like that. AI can never make a presentation for you in front of a classroom, right? Like if you're like, listen, it's a skit that you guys have to write about, about the nuclei.
Yep. And, listen, if you are in charge of who is teaming up with who, you're also then giving a bunch of experiences to people. Like if they have a bad experience with one team and they don't like the video that they made, they're not going to be on that team next week anyways, right? They're going to get paired up in a different way. So it's up to the teacher to really make sure that is happening so that people are collaborating with people they might not be drawn to, but then they'll find new things. The that moment of creative discovery, that feeling, like anytime we've been hanging out, brainstorming an idea, or anytime you've been with any other group of people trying to come up with something, even by yourself, trying to write, like you've written a few plays. So those moments where you're trying to come up with something, that moment you experience of a creative discovery feels amazing. It's my favorite thing when I'm directing a play, to be sitting there watching the actors making discoveries on stage. There's a high to it. There's like a chemical reaction, an aha moment where suddenly things seem to make sense in a way that they didn't make sense before. And so if you can put that into the process and create that positive feedback loop, your students will not be able to help themselves but learn, for the most part.
I like to work on the character name first and then work my way back from there. One of my all-time favorites that I used to do on Rock 102 was I created a place called Camp John Mellencamp. And it was America's premier John Mellencamp experience for young campers. Because I thought that was funny. But I was like, well, and we would do these fake call-ins from like the head counselor trying to like either respond to a story that's been in the news about Camp John Mellencamp or try and entice parents to send their kids. And so they're like, what's the name of this person? And I was like, I don't know. And then I was walking through an elementary school for an improv show, and they separated their lockers by a different type of animal. So these were the tiger lockers, okay? And like over here was the iguana lockers. Those are green. And then we got to bear lockers, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's name is Jeremy Bearlocker. And Jeremy Bearlocker was so like, he's like, hey campers, it's Jeremy Bearlocker. It's a great summer at Camp John Mellencamp. And I want to let you know right off the bat, we absolutely do not have any flesh-eating virus in the lake. It was in the water supply, but we've been assured it's taken care of.
I do love collecting names. When you see one on a billboard or something, that's where I got Gerald Ustanko from, because that was an actual name for a lawyer of some kind. And
really?
It was Gerald and then Ustanko. And I thought there's no way to pronounce that other than Ustanko. And so that was the character that Brad Delzer played in a lot of my movies, or relatives of that Gerald Ustanko. There was like the
first Baby Bumpy short had Gerald Ustanko.
And I think there's like a Swedish cousin he has that was in For Love of the Game. But the Ustankos are out there. I love the Ustanko clan and seeing them show up in movies over and over again.
I haven't been really able to write this character, but his name's Poof Daddy, and he's a rapping magician. And it's somebody whose parents like wanted him to get a job, and so he wants to rap. So he ends up having to do that. There's character names are always funny to me. Like, it's great. Okay, well, we'll leave it on this. Thank you very much for educating us on edutainment, Tucker.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for asking me to pontificate on it. What was your character name, by the way, in video production class? What name did you primarily go by?
I think I went by JJ Gordon.
You just went by JJ. Yeah.
I think so.
I ripped off Simpsons, and my character was Joey Jojo Jr. Shavadu. Never actually honed in on a character for that guy.
It's a horrible name.
Wait, Joey Jojo.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information.
I think the best character name of all time is Pat.